What's up, nerds? So don't buy this thing, or any other modern console. They're basically blatant ripoffs. Instead, buy something like this. If you're not interested in the whole talking section, you just want to see a straight breakdown, you can skip to the end of this video and I'm going to have a breakdown between the PS5 and the PS Vita. The PS Vita is about 12 years older than the PS5, yet the PS5 is still a ripoff compared to the PS Vita. So if you're anything like me, you've seen like a lot of new games and exclusives come out for specifically certain consoles and different devices, and they're going over why these are like great deals for the consumers and why they're just super great devices. But I'm going to go over 3 reasons why these things are blatant ripoffs and 3 reasons to counteract that if you want to get some enjoyment out of playing games. Now obviously everyone has their personal preference and a lot of things are going to depend on what types of games you want to play. I mean, if you want to play things like Nintendo games, you're going to need something like a Switch. But if you want to play a lot of older games, probably buying a modern console is not the way to go. So with that, take everything I say with a grain of salt, but I'm just going to go over why these are ripoffs. My first point is why modern gaming is kind of bad. And keep in mind, I'm not talking about all studios. A lot of the big studios are just out for profit. I mean, I feel like everyone knows it, and it's crazy to see compared to things like Disney, just how much profits the gaming industry makes and these big competitors make. And to put it in perspective, although Nvidia does AI, they're also the #1 company in the world now, which is just a crazy stat to know. It seems like the bigger fish always eats the smaller fish. So even huge companies like Activision get taken over by Microsoft and they buy and acquire all of that stuff just so they can use a lot of those games for their console exclusively. And I feel like everyone kind of knows it, but it's always the profit over the consumer. But it really wasn't always like this. It seems that around 2012, 2013 is when companies started going more for the profit and cared less about the customer experience of their products. The second reason why I feel like these are a ripoff is because you buy the device, but you have to purchase monthly subscriptions to use these. Now, I recently did a video about the death of ownership. I got that thing right there. Shameless plug real quick, but you literally have to pay a monthly subscription to play any online game or to use their Game Pass. And these monthly subscriptions aren't very cheap. They try to kind of play it off as they're cheap, so they'll give you like 5 months, 3 months for $1, and then you have to pay $12 a month going forward from that. And that's about $144 a year, which is just a crazy subscription price, all just to play games online, which is kind of dumb. I mean, even things like Grand Theft Auto, if you want to play it online, you got to pay that monthly subscription. Now, things like PCs and stuff don't have these monthly subscriptions, and there's ways around it even if they do for certain games. And lastly, they're really not worth the cost. I mean, consoles will run you about $300 to $400 even if they're used, which is just kind of a crazy price to pay, especially when you can find some alternatives out there, or you can shell out an extra $200 to $300 and get a pretty good PC that can play all the games you want, and it's also a PC you can do whatever you want with it. So it's just nice that if you want to spend that a little bit extra money, you have something that's actually upgradable. You don't have to wait for the next generation to come out. And it's kind of bad how these companies kill off their old consoles once a new one comes out. And granted, I will say at least they wait 5 to 10 years before coming out with a new console, unlike phones which just come out new ones every year. But I will say that if you have that old console, I mean, you can still use it, you can still play games on it, but you're kind of screwed when it comes to anything that's a newer game once that new console comes out. Since we have all those reasons why the gaming industry now kind of sucks, I'm going to go over some alternatives that you can do, which is things that I've personally done. Now, do keep in mind, I don't play the most amount of games or anything like that. I'm more of like a casual player. I play like GTA, sometimes I play Smash with friends, but it's really all about the equipment that you already have around you. So you might have an older console, and there's probably some older games that you can pick up for a lot cheaper than getting a new console. I mean, if you have like an old MacBook, it can still run emulations. And you can play a lot of older games on it, like things like Dolphin run on the older macOS versions, which is pretty nice. So if you do have one of those, I would suggest looking into modding that kind of stuff first and seeing if you can play some games through that. I mean, you might have to do maybe an afternoon or 2 worth of work, but in the long run, you're saving like $200 to $300. In my opinion, you're getting almost the same experience, if not better, than you would with a modern day gaming console. Now, one thing that I've personally done was pick up one of these. So this ran me about $150. I got it pre-modded, but if you get it without any mods on it, it's about $100. And this thing is a pretty powerful little device. I mean, it came out in 2012. It's still able to run a lot of relatively modern games. Like, it plays until before GTA 4, which is a pretty crazy thing given its scale. I mean, this thing's about the size of my iPhone. It has great build quality, and the modding scene is super active on Reddit and stuff. You can basically find answers to all of your questions if you have any. And it's also other things like the backbone, so your iPhone can actually play a lot of different games and stuff, and it actually runs them pretty well as well. Even if you don't pay up front for that console, there's a lot of game streaming things, which if you don't really care about playing competitively and you just kind of want to have the fun experience and your internet's pretty fast, I would suggest looking into that option, because that might only run you about $12 a month, which is the same price that you'd be paying to play online with an Xbox or a PS5 anyway. Lastly, if you do want some sort of hardware that you can run the game on, getting a PC might be the way to do it, because with a PC, you can actually do a lot of other things aside from just playing games. And if your main goal is to actually play games, there's tons of guides and lists out there on how you could build a pretty good PC for under like 600 bucks. I mean, you can get a lot of parts that are like 4+ years old, and they'll still be able to run a lot of the modern games at around 1080p. So this is low-key the way to go instead of upgrading to a newer console. If you do like gaming on your TV, you can get one of these $50 Chromecasts, and the Chromecast can actually stream from your PC to the Chromecast, and it's pretty low latency. Or you can run an HDMI cable from your PC to your TV and play all the games there with no latency at all. And like some people say that you're gonna miss out on the exclusive games, but I will say that a lot of the exclusive games oftentimes get like leaked and ported, and sometimes they get officially ported over. Like the Spider-Man Miles Morales game is now on PC, which it was a PS5 exclusive for the longest time, and Spider-Man 2 is unofficially leaked, so people have it on their PC as well. Now if you want to see my PC build, I built it for about $1,000, and it's more for editing and like CGI kind of stuff, but I got it right there for you. If you're liking this video so far, I got a great community here. Oftentimes you guys even comment things and tell me stuff that I didn't even know about. So I just really love tech and talking about tech news and just my opinions on tech. So yeah, if you're interested in that, be sure to like or subscribe. Now let's go to the head-to-head comparison between an older console like the PS Vita and the PS5. What's up, nerds? So welcome to the second part of the video, which is actually just a straight up breakdown between the two. So I've decided to create some categories for each one. I'm basically going to compare the Vita to the console. So we're going to take a look at the price, the games, the build quality of them, the versatility of them, and finally we're going to discuss if it's really fun or not and what you're really gaining from the difference between a console and the PS Vita. Now keep in mind, like I said earlier in the video, it doesn't have to be the Vita, it could be basically anything you use to get around buying a console. So things like a PC might have different qualities than the Vita might, but I just thought the Vita was a good baseline. It's a pretty cheap device. Even things like the backbone, like I talked about earlier, could also pretty much compete with the console and be a very cheap alternative to actually owning a console. So let's get into the breakdowns. So we're going to start out with the price between the Vita and the console. So Vitas can run anywhere from 100 to 150 depending on if you modded them or not. Now you can find them somewhere outside of this range, but most of the time you're going to find them within this range. Now consoles are going to run you about $300+, even used. That would be a pretty big detriment, since they probably would last a little bit of time, but especially since you're going to get used. I know the PlayStation 6 already has a date that they listed for when they're going to release it, sometime 2026, 2027 year. Then let's check out this next category, which is the games. So like I said earlier, there's a lot of exclusives, but those often get released later. But you'd be surprised at how many games they actually have available on the Vita. So most games before 2012 are going to be available for the Vita, and that even includes things like the N64, and it can emulate different games actually on the Vita, which is pretty nice. It's pretty portable, so that's actually a pro for it. But let's talk about the games for consoles. So consoles actually only really have the exclusives and whatever the publishers want to put on there. So I know Activision got bought out by Microsoft, like I said earlier. And they do have a pretty expansive library of games, and a lot of games that most people are playing are going to be available on the console. But they oftentimes have higher prices, and you really can't shop around. You're basically limited to whatever the Xbox store or the PlayStation store has for you. You can't really get around prices, or like if Steam has a deal, you're not really going to have access to that. Whereas with the Vita, basically all the games there are free, but I'm not endorsing that, but I'm just saying you could do that on the Vita and get a lot of those pre-2012 games. So let's talk about the build quality. So I would say the Vita has one of the best build qualities I've seen for not only a controller, but for the actual device. It has a pretty good battery life built in and things like that, but you can really mod it, and there's a big modding scene actually on Reddit like I talked about earlier, so that will help a lot with the build quality and the feel. So I would say that that's pretty excellent. Then let's get into the console. I would say it's okay. It's not like the best build quality, but it really just kind of sits on your shelf. It's not going to be something that you're going to be interacting with on the daily. Really care more about the controllers, and I will say PlayStation controllers are really, really good, but keep in mind the Vita is also designed by PlayStation, so that a lot of that controller comes with it, and I would say the sticks on the Vita are smaller than your average console, but it's not something that you can't get used to, and it actually feels great in the hands. Whereas the build quality with the PlayStation 5 controller is pretty great, but it's not really something that's super out of the ordinary for most console controllers. And if you really did want that controller, you can play on a PC and just buy the controller. So let's get into the versatility of them. So this might be a little unfair because consoles are meant to stay at home, but I will say with the Vita, it's portable. You could also play on the TV by buying the TV mount for it, which is like 40 bucks extra, and you could probably find it even cheaper since all of them are used. They don't really manufacture them anymore. So that is nice. So you could actually play on the TV and bring it with you. Whereas the PlayStation 5 has the PlayStation Portal, but you can actually get away with, if you own a PS4, you can actually stream everything to your PS Vita and play your PS4 games on your PS Vita if you want to play some of the more modern games and you have that console. But I won't count that as a point towards the Vita, but I will say the Vita just has better versatility. You can play more games with it, and it's more expansive of a library, and you can bring it with you, where you can't really do that with the PlayStation. So I'm going to give this one to the PS Vita. And lastly, for the fun of them, it's really up to you. Like I said before, I'm not going to go ahead and say don't buy a console if there's games that you really want to play and you really think that's the best choice for you. And I kind of hate when videos do this, but I will say, in my personal opinion, the Vita is just a better deal than buying a console because you're paying about half the price to get way more of the features. You don't have to pay any premiums, or you don't really even have to buy games if you don't want to. And you can have a lot more fun with the games on the Vita than you can with more modern day games, since a lot of them are really only after the profits, like I said before. If you enjoy listening to tech commentary and things like that, stick around because I got tons of videos for you. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. See ya.